Dear students, welcome to my class on Alexander Pope's The Rape of the Lock, Canto 3. So we have done Canto 1, Canto 2, and we saw that Belinda got up very late. It was almost afternoon, and after getting ready, it was a just like a religious ritual. Pope took us into her dressing room to show us how she is getting ready for something great. But now we know that she has already reached Hampton Court, where Queen Anne meet her statesmen and discuss the strategy of how to run the country and its affairs. And let us see what these young men and women are going to do at Hampton Court. So, Canto 3. Pope's rendering of the card game as a heroic battle advances his epic parody and foreshadows the scuffle over the lock in the 5th canto. He again figures Belinda as an epic hero, and the extended metaphor of the game as a battle reinforces her masculine approach. During the game, Belinda's strategy is aggressive and ambitious, and Pope shows Belinda's desire for the recognition that the battle will bring to her. So, Belinda, now, whom thirst of fame invites, burns to encounter two adventurous knights and swells her breast with conquests yet to come. In keeping with the martial theme, Pope portrays Belinda as a cunning journal. The skillful nymph reviews her force with care. He further depicts her cards, her army, as virile male characters. Now move to war her sable matadors in shows like leaders of the swarthy Moors. Pope emphasizes this hyper masculine depiction of Belinda when she wins the game. So, Baron is defeated by her. Rather than graciously acknowledging her victory with modest reserve, Belinda gloats over the losers. The nymph exulting fills with shouts the sky. Unlike the 10 years of violent combat over Troy in the Iliad, however, this evening's card game is the pastime of these young aristocrats. By elevating this trivial amusement with the language of the epic struggle between two civilizations, Pope suggests that the bravery once exhibited on the battlefield by Greek and Trojan heroes is now limited to the petty games and flirtations of the upper classes. Satire it is. The heroic theme extended to the severing of the lock. The Baron's 3 attempts to cut Belinda's hair mirror the hero's trials before completing his quest, which Pope emphasizes at the end of the canto by comparing the Baron's victory to the conquests of Troy. Likewise, Clarissa's army of the Baron with her scissors, evokes the tradition of the lovers' farewells before battle. It is Clarissa who hands over a scissor to Baron so that he can cut Belinda's hair. Of course, the theft of Belinda's hair is an insignificant squabble in comparison to the abduction of Helen and a decade of war. With the complicity of Clarissa, the severing of Belinda's lock, Pope introduces a criticism of the relationships between women, which he explores in the poem's sexual allegory. Clarissa's willingfulness to participate in the metaphoric rape of Belinda suggests that rather than a sisterhood united against male sexual advances, women seek to undermine each other in the competition to find a suitable husband. Belinda's sexual fall would remove her from the marriage market, ensuring less competition for rich or titled young men such as the Baron. Of course, a woman does not have to compromise her virtue to lose her honor, which Pope depicts during the gossip at the beginning of the canto, and I am quoting, "At every word, a reputation dies." In this society, the loss of reputation has much the same result as sexual transgression. Pope's depiction of unkind womanly attitudes towards each other serves to criticize society's sexual double standard in which a woman must attract a husband without compromising her virtue. In the third canto, Pope expands his social critique beyond the trivial entertainments and petty squabbles of the aristocracy. Using the structure of the heroic couplet, he creates parallel constructions that expose the harsh realities of life outside of the amusements of Hampton Court Palace. He describes Hampton Court as the place where Queen Anne does sometimes counsel take and sometimes tea. Here Pope employs, a rhetorical device in which a word modifies two other words or phrases in a parallel construction, modifying each according to a different sense. In this instance, take modifies both counsel and tea. But one does not take counsel and tea in the same way. So this reveals that Hampton Court as a palace that hosts both matters of state and social diversions. Similarly, in the second verse paragraph, some of Belinda's companions discuss balls and visit, while another speak the glory of the British Queen, and one describes a charming Indian screen. So these youngsters are just gossiping on insignificant matters. While some members of the party relate stories about their social engagements, the reference to the British Queen and Indian screen serves as a reminder of the world outside of the Hampton Court. In particular, the words British and Indian evoke the British Empire, worlds away from the comforts of Hampton Court. The serving of coffee, which makes the politicians wise and see through all things with his half-shut eyes, likewise suggests British trade and a political world beyond the amusements of this aristocratic party. Pope's use of parallel constructions within the heroic couplets thus reveals the serious matters that exist outside of the lords and ladies' gossip. And now let us come to Canto 4. The fourth canto opens with Belinda languishing in rage, resentment, and despair, eclipsing the sorrows of kings imprisoned after battle, scornful women who become spinsters, lovers robbed of their happiness, medieval women refused kisses, tyrants who die without repenting, and a woman whose dress is unkempt. So Alexander Pope uses so many similes to tell us that Belinda is really sad, feeling gloomy over the theft of her lock. Pope places each of these individuals in their own line so that their sorrows have equal footing and none is subordinate. Of course, the despair of a captured king far, outweighs the aggravation of a woman who appears disabled. By placing all of these figures subordinate to Belinda, Pope accentuates the excess and impropriety of her grief after the theft of her hair, a minor setback. He thus chastises those who place excessive significance on trivial problems. Furthermore, by equating the disparate sorrows enumerated this first verse paragraph, Pope emphasizes the importance of a moral code with which to evaluate the validity of these emotions. Now, in epic, there is a journey. There's always a journey. So, in this mock epic, there is a journey to the underworld. So, Umbriel descent into the cave of spleen evokes the journeys to the underworld made by the Odysseus in the Odyssey and Aeneas in the Aeneid. This sequence perverts the traditional epic justifications for visiting the underworld. Usually, the hero requires for his quest and travels to the underworld to consult a deceased friend or relative. Overcome with despair, Belinda has retired to her bed. So instead of hero's visit to the underworld, Pope depicts the descent of a trouble-making gnome. Of course, Umbriel has no intention of assisting Belinda in recovering the lock. Rather, he travels to the cave of spleen for methods to increase Belinda's pain. In her sorrow, Belinda is attended by ill nature and affectation, whose presence suggests that the heroine's grief is affected rather than a true reflection of her emotion. Her anguish is thus equally as decorative as her locks, completely undermining the elevation of her misery in the first verse paragraph. Pope further emphasizes the epic tradition in Thalestris' speech. She figures the severing of the lock as an affront to Belinda's honor, encouraging her friend to avenge this insult. Offended honor is a common theme in epic poetry. At the outset of the Iliad, Achilles is enraged at Agamemnon for insulting him. So Thalestris attempts to rouse Belinda's anger serve as a reminder of the behavior Belinda should be demonstrating as the epic hero. In Belinda's place, Thalestris is outraged. Her presence reinforces Pope's manipulation of the epic genre, borrowing the Amazon from Greek mythology. Here, Pope's, also draws on chivalric ideals from the Romance genre. She asks Sir Plum to defend Belinda's honor by demanding that the Baron return the lock. But Sir Plum fails utterly, muttering only slang terms in his confrontation with the Baron. His failure to restore Belinda's honor demonstrates the degree to which chivalry has declined. Pope's discussion of honor in this canto re-emphasizes poem's sexual allegory. Through the poem, title figures the severing of Belinda's hair as an overt sexual violation. Thalestris intimates that Belinda's ultimate concern should be what the Baron will do with the ringlet or the curls of Belinda's hair. She worries that the Baron will display the curl to the public and thereby endanger Belinda's honor and reputation. She envisions the Baron's triumphant exhibition of the hair. And she says, "Methinks already I your tears survey. In a whisper, already hear the horrid things they say. Already see you a degraded toast, and all your honor in a whisper lost." So Thalestris' description of Belinda's humiliation demonstrates society's emphasis on the external appearance of morality. Pope reinforces this focus on appearances at the end of the canto when Belinda laments her lost curl, and I am quoting, "O hadst thou, cruel, been content to seize hairs less in sight, or any hairs but these." The hairs less in sight suggest her pubic hairs, which are more explicitly sexual than the ringlet that the Baron stole. So Belinda's preference for the theft of her pubic hairs indicates that she would rather compromise her virtue than suffer damage to her looks. So Pope thus demonstrates the misplaced significance and value that society places on external appearances. This is the end of Canto 4. And now we come to Canto 5. Welcome to Canto 5. Some critics have, interpreted Clarissa's help to Baron as that she was an accessory to the rape. But some critics say that she is the mouthpiece of Alexander Pope. But a few critics do not agree to this. So let us read Canto 5. Some critics have interpreted Clarissa's moralizing as the voice of Pope, articulating the poem's moral. But this is a gross misreading of the poem. Though Clarissa's speech would certainly serve Pope's basic purpose of reconciling the families of Arabella Fermor and the Lord Peter, Pope's satire achieves a broader and more complex social critique ranging from the idleness of the upper classes to the sexual double standard for women. Clarissa's warnings about the ephemeral nature of beauty are valid, but provide an interpretive problem. Although she assumes the voice of moral superiority at this point in the poem, it is she who provided the weapon that cut Belinda's hair. She has therefore undermined Belinda's honor and is largely responsible for the present quarrel. Thus, Clarissa cannot claim moral authority as she attempts to do in this speech of good sense and humor. Clarissa's failure to pacify Belinda creates an occasion for the poem's second epic battle. Unlike the card game in the third canto, the struggle over the lock has erotic implications, which befit the sexual allegory of the poem. The din made during the fight, rustling clothing, and confused shouts more closely resembles erotic sounds than the noises of the battle. And I'm quoting, "Fans clap, silks rustle, and tough whalebones crack. Heroes and heroines shouts confusedly rise." The postures of the combatants likewise take on sexual connotations. During the fight, Sir Plum draws Clarissa down, suggesting a sexual act rather than the striking down of an enemy. Similarly, Belinda basically sits on the Baron when she overcomes him, an obviously sexual position. This eroticism of the battle culminates with the sexual double meaning of the word die. Though die can refer to the physical death, it is clear that men are not actually expiring during the fight. Rather, Pope uses the word die as a metaphor for orgasm in the sense of sexual imagery. Most significantly, the Baron who stole Belinda's sexually charged lock of hair fights unafraid because he sought no more on his foe to die. This suggests that his goal throughout the poem has been sexual gratification. Despite its erotic overtones, the battle over the lock is also the culmination of Pope's heroic parody. Following the epic paradigm, Pope invokes the martial Greek and Roman gods. And I'm quoting, against Pallas, Mars, Latona, Hermes arms, and all Olympus rings with loud alarms, Jove's thunder roars, blue Neptune storms. So Pope simultaneously undermines these lofty allusions by killing the men in rather ridiculous fashions. Dapperwit and Sir Fopling faint, as the women overcome them, while Chol kills Sir Plum with a frown. She smiles when he dies, and at her smile, Sir Plum revives again. The absurdity of these deaths demonstrates the triviality of the scuffle and emphasizes Pope's mock heroic tone. The reversal of gender roles also contributes to Pope's parody of the epic. In this battle, the women are the aggressors. Pope calls Thalestris the fierce virago, and she easily overcomes many of the men. While Thalestris is the most vicious of the female combatants, Belinda remains the heroic figure. Flying to her enemy with more than usual lightning in her eyes, she abandons all pretext of ladylike grace. In a shout that echoes her victorious cry at the end of the card game, Belinda demands for the return of the lock from Baron. Not fierce Othello, in so loud a strain, roared for the handkerchief that caused his pain. Her rage thus turns into a swarthy warrior, and she easily overcomes the Baron. At this point, Pope diffuses the epic tone of the poem. Belinda's use of snuff trivializes the fight, causing the Baron to sneeze, a most unheroic action. Pope concludes the poem with a final compliment to Arabella Fermor, the historical inspiration for Belinda. By depicting the lost girl as a star in the firmament or the galaxy, he refuses to chastise Belinda's behavior and instead celebrates Miss Fermor and Belinda. The poem's conclusion indulges female vanity, immortalizing Miss Arabella Fermor's experience in verse, just as the heavens become an eternal testament to Belinda's beauty. Despite the poem's social critiques, the poem ends with little moral development. Belinda's hair will grow back, and her beauty will be admired even after her death. The poem is thus an example of Horatian satire. Rather than exposing the evils of the aristocracy, the poem provides a gentle critique that generally sympathizes with the characters in spite of their follies. Thank you so much. I hope that all the 5 cantos of The Rape of the Lock, written by 18th century poet Alexander Pope, are clear to you. Please refer to my previous YouTube video on its background reading and then watch this presentation. Thank you so much.